Rabbids Invasion. The Need for Speed. Chapter 1. A Deserted Highway. A fly buzzed through the air down a deserted highway. Right behind the fly were 4 Rabbids. They were each hopping from one foot to the other down the middle of the road because why wouldn't they? As the Rabbids continued their fun game, well, fun for them, a police car drove past and pulled over. A young deputy named Garrett got out and dragged a heavy radar machine over to the side of the road. "Deputy Garrett, report!" came a loud voice from the deputy's walkie-talkie. "I need photos of those license plates, and you better not mess this up." "Right, Chief," Deputy Garrett said onto the walkie-talkie. He went over to adjust the machine as a speeding van approached. The Rabbids, who were now hopping over each other in the middle of the road, didn't notice the van approaching, or maybe they did notice it and didn't care. It sped past them so quickly that they were knocked over, right onto their butts. Deputy Garrett's radar machine snapped a picture of the van. "Yes!" he shouted, pumping his fist in the air. "You are mine," he said to the van as it sped farther away into the distance. But when he pulled the picture out of the radar machine, it did not show the license plate of the speeding van. It showed a smiling rabbit. Why a rabbit was smiling when it had just been knocked off its speed by a speeding van is unclear. But it may have knocked over onto your butt. Is fun when you're a rabbit. Chapter 2. The Radar Machine. By now, the Rabbids had noticed the radar machine. Of course, they didn't know it was a radar machine. All they knew that it flashed and then a picture of one of them came out of it. Deputy Garrett's walkie-talkie chirped, and he tried to tell the chief what had happened, but he wasn't picking up a signal, so he walked away from the radar machine, which, as you probably know, was not a very good idea. The Rabbids surrounded the machine, pulling levers and pushing buttons, and there were a lot of buttons. Deputy Garrett finally noticed that what they were doing and yelled at them to stop. But the Rabbids didn't want to stop, so they did something that made a lot of sense to them, at least. They picked up the radar machine and ran with it, in circles, around the police car. Why would they do that, you might be wondering? Well, why not? Deputy Garrett followed them around and around the police car until one of the Rabbids decided the car itself was more interesting than the radar machine and climbed inside. The other Rabbids continued to lead Deputy Garrett in circles around the car. The 4th Rabbid watched the action from inside the car until he changed his mind and decided he wanted to be a part of the fun outside the car again. Or maybe it was getting really hot in the car. Either way, he opened the car door just as Deputy Garrett dashed around the corner and knocked the deputy to the ground. On his butt. "Whoa!" said the Rabbids as they stared down at the deputy. Then one in the car hopped out, stepped on Deputy Garrett, and they all ran off with the radar machine. Chapter 3. Buzz! The Rabbids wanted the radar machine to take pictures of them again. They stood in front of it and looked at it very, very hard. But it didn't flash the way it did when a car came by. This was because the Rabbids weren't tall enough for the machine to detect them. But they didn't know that, of course. Then a fly came along and started buzzing around in front of the machine, which quickly began flashing and taking pictures. This gave the Rabbids an idea. They decided to imitate the fly. They buzzed and buzzed and flapped around in the air, their arms in the air. They looked as much like flies as Rabbids can, which isn't very much, actually. Still, the radar machine began taking pictures of the Rabbids. Well, it was really only taking pictures because the fly was flying in front of it. But the Rabbids thought they were the ones making it take pictures. Three of the rabbits were having so much fun pretending to be flies that they didn't even notice when the radar machine spat out the pictures they had taken of them. The fourth rabbit, however, did notice. He took the pictures and stuck them onto Deputy Garrett's police car. The other three rabbits stopped playing. They all stood back and admired themselves. They probably would have stood there admiring their images for a very long time, but then the four rabbits heard a strange noise. It was the voice of the police chief coming from Deputy Garrett's walkie-talkie. The rabbits went to it and stared at it. "Deputy Garrett, are you there?" the walkie-talkie screeched. One rabbit picked up the walkie-talkie and tried to talk back to the police chief, but the chief couldn't hear him. The rabbit didn't care. It was fun yelling into the screeching walkie-talkie, and he kept yelling until he realized he was upside down. Chapter 4. Rabbits Take Flight. Deputy Garrett had woken up and picked up his walkie-talkie, with the rabbit still attached to it. He shook the walkie-talkie hard, trying to get the rabbit to let go, but the rabbit would not. He may not have known what the walkie-talkie was and why a voice was coming out of it, but he knew he wanted it. His rabbit friends grabbed onto him to help to get the walkie-talkie, but Deputy Garrett just pulled even harder. He pulled so hard that he launched all four rabbits into the air. "Wah!" screamed the rabbits as they soared through the sky. Then they decided that this flying thing was kind of fun. They flapped their arms, but quickly realized that this wasn't going to stop them from falling. And fall they did. All four rabbits landed on the dusty ground with loud thuds. And yes, they landed on their butts. Chapter 5. To Catch a Rabbit. Now that he had gotten rid of all the rabbits, or so he thought, Deputy Garrett went back to his very important job of trying to catch speeding drivers. He reset his radar machine just as another car approached, and sure enough, the car was speeding. This time, the picture that the machine spit out was actually of the car's license plate. Deputy Garrett was very happy. Before the deputy could report his success back to the chief, another car came speeding by. This car was going faster than any car Deputy Garrett had ever seen. It went so fast that it knocked him over. Can you guess how he landed? His radar machine flashed and spit out a picture. Deputy Garrett looked at the picture with bad feeling. Sure enough, it was a picture of the rabbits hanging onto the back of a pickup truck as if they were surfing. The rabbits tried a lot of different ways to have their picture taken by the radar machine. Two rabbits raced past on the insides of giant truck tires. Two more rabbits went by riding a big cow. Another rabbit rode on a skateboard that was being pulled along by a tiny, fluffy dog. Then one of the rabbits went past riding a chicken. If you're familiar with the rabbits, then you know they love to ride chickens. Deputy Garrett tried his best to catch a rabbit, but they slipped out of his grasp every time. Also, he focused on only one of the rabbits, the one that was running in circles around the radar machine. It might have been easier to catch, say, one of the rabbits riding the cow, because the cow was going very slowly. But poor Deputy Garrett wasn't thinking very clearly at this point. In fact, the deputy was getting so fed up with the rabbits that he grabbed the one thing he could catch, the radar machine. The radar machine can't move, so obviously Deputy Garrett could catch it. But as we've said, he wasn't thinking very clearly. Then he took the radar machine and smashed it into pieces. As you can imagine, the rabbits loved this. They clapped along as the deputy jumped up and down on the machine. Chapter 6. Man Without Machine. Now that the deputy had destroyed his fancy radar machine, he was forced to use red and green panels to tell cars when to stop and when to go. He stood at the crosswalk so he could tell pedestrians when it was safe to cross. There weren't really any pedestrians around though. There were only rabbits. Deputy Garrett sighed as the rabbits waited patiently on the side of the highway for him to tell them when they could cross. The rabbits got halfway across the street before they stopped in their tracks. Can you guess what made them stop? Paddles. That's right. It was Deputy Garrett's red and green paddles that fascinated the rabbits so much. They jumped and grabbed the paddles until the deputy got so frustrated that he threw them on the ground and ran away screaming. So the rabbits were in control of directing traffic, and you can probably imagine how well that went. Not well at all. The end. So that was Rabbids Invasion, the need for speed.
Daddy,